Thank you, Dr. Yeager. So motion and seconded by Mr. Properly. Any questions? All in favor of adopting the agenda as printed, please say aye. Opposed, the same sign. The minutes, the agenda is adopted. Item 3 is information items, and these were already provided to us in our preparation for tonight's meeting. So the first item is the Early Head Start Policy Council meeting minutes and reports. Any questions or concerns about that report? Hearing none. Athens Community Career Academy report, and I did notice that that report is from May. Any questions or concerns about that report? Hearing none. SPOS monthly report is October. Any questions or concerns about that report? Any discussion? Thank you. We're moving now to item 4, the board committee reports. And the first up is Dr. Yeager and the policy committee.
I'll be brief. We have 2 policies on today's agenda to discuss and 4 that had no public input to move forward for passing. That's all we have. And I guess I can update you on what we're doing next. We received several requests from different board members to put new items on the agenda for the policy committee, and those are underway.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Any other further discussion about the policy committee report as rendered by Dr. Yeager? Moving to item 4.2, government and community relations report. Mr. Davis.
Yes. And I will entertain some suggestions from fellow board members in terms of how to handle it, because it could be as extensive or as quickly as we want it to be. We had a community event on September 14th, of which 8 board members participated. We met with members of the, and these were people who were either selected by LSGTs or they were, who were present. We had community neighborhood leaders from CIS who also signed up, as well as a number of parents and staff members. And so we from that we had a number, and the purpose of this community event was to look at how we could better operate as a board. And so the focus was on us. There are 11 proposals that from those who participated in the event, board members that participated and turned their notes into me. These are the notes. I got permission from the government and community relations committee to go ahead and synthesize the recommendations that were made by these members of the public, and I did so, and then I gave it to, and I sent it out to all the board if they wanted to make additional additions. And from that, there were 11 proposals. And I think what I would like to do is at least have us review them and highlight ones that we would want the Government and Community Relations Committee to pursue, would be one suggestion. And so I kind of entertain, because most everybody here participated, and so I'm open to how to proceed at this point.
So is this a recommendation coming from the committee in terms of how you want us to proceed?
We talked about synthesizing the recommendations and bringing them to the board. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I've done. And so we were not going to direct the board in terms of what to do at that point. But these are we've talked about both through the cognitive process as well as our training that we've had with the government school, the Georgia School Board Association, to solicit community input into how we operate and how we do things. So I would like to at least talk briefly about each one of these, enough to get the sense of, yeah, we really need to move on this, or this is something that we need to give a lot more thought to. And so that would be my suggestion. Because each one of these could probably be a half-hour discussion. So, and that's not realistic.
And again, I would caution us, because that exercise, along with the survey that's out there still, that we haven't addressed the response from, sounds like something that maybe the president and Dr. Thomas could have a conversation with, maybe it's a retreat or something that we use to try and synthesize that data. I don't have an idea, but I mean, I'm suggesting that we not take them in a vacuum, that both of them were community input to the board's performance, if you would. And so either a recommendation from your committee, perhaps, or maybe you and Dr. Thomas and Dr. Gant should have a conversation about what is our next best way to proceed.
And I'm sorry, Ms. Davis, are you speaking of the items that you shared on the October 2nd email?
Yes, and they're also on the agenda.
Okay, because a good number of these are already done or would not be a long conversation. So, I mean, and we're not.
If we could, and maybe that would be helpful if we could clarify that so that we can.
So should that be done in the Government and Community Relations Committee meeting?
See, we've already discussed it. We organize the event. We discuss the outcome of the event. At some point, it does raise to the level of a board discussion in terms of, how we want to increase our involvement, because all these involve different ways of reaching out to the community.
Some of them are very simple, and I would just give an example. But central office staff notifying and encouraging board to attend events. All of the schools have their events posted on their school website. So that to me is simple in terms of board members could look at the calendar for the schools that they represent and find out what events are held. So that's just a simple, because I sent this list to our team and we went through to see how we can support in many of these areas. And so that one is that's a simple solution. But I would agree with Ms. Davis in that I think we need to reconcile, because this was one forum with a group of participants, and then we had a couple of hundred people that replied to the survey. So that's another forum. So in my opinion, rather than responding to the list from one, we need to try to reconcile all of that input and then see what rises to the top, and then determine where do we start, or where do you all start? Because I know this is board work, but I agree that we shouldn't look at this in isolation when we have another tool out there when we can really see what the overlap is and then move from there. But there are some of these I can get you answers to, like tomorrow, that are easy for us.
Looks like Dr. Yeager.
I was just going to say, some of these are also a request for work by the district to support the board, including the board briefs and the budget dashboard and some of those things, which we were very clearly asked by the community to provide those things, and transmitting them to you. And then I guess those of us that were part of those conversations would like to find ways to make sure we support you in that effort, because
and like board briefs have already been added now since this came out. There's a link, and revisions are being made to board briefs, but there's now a link where those can be found on the website.
Yeah.
Working on the dashboard, that's going to take time. So we are responding to the things in here that are directly aligned to our work, and then ones that we can support the board in, we are already taking action on.
Well, just to follow up on just that one area, because I think it's great that we're doing that, because that is a step forward. But I think in terms of what I was gathering from what was turned into me in terms of notes that what at least some community members were asking was actually a place where they can submit their their email addresses and have things sent out to them. You know, I think it's great that we access, that we encourage the community to access our website. But I think it's kind of going one step further for those who have expressed interest in following what's happening with the school board, that they receive email newsletters from us, or at least by your staff on behalf of the board. And so that would be one thing that I think, in terms of doing something extra, that if that was something that the board saw as important, that maybe we could bring that to the surface and actually have a link where people could say, yeah, this is my email address, and I would love to get a monthly newsletter from the Board of Education. So again, I don't mean to just single that out, but I think that's a type of discussion that I would certainly like us to have. And again, it depends upon, I'm just one member of the board, but I think it depends upon how, and I don't want to use, I'm not saying we're unserious, but if we're talking about really reaching out to the community and make ourselves more accessible, then, we need to make the fact that we're doing this even public, and not saying, well, we're going to go behind, we're going to go in offices and we're going to discuss things that we can change and tweak and this type of thing, and hopefully be more responsive. But again, that's just me, and I'm not trying to postpone the meeting.
But was your intent to have this discussion tonight?
That is what I said in that email.
Now I heard that it's not printed on my agenda.
Well, if you look at the document that's attached, it says below are proposed actions that came from the community during the September 14th school board event. And these items seek to improve the operations of the Clark County School Board. The Government and Community Relations Committee are bringing these items forward for discussion and action by the entire board.
Okay.
So again, if that's not the wishes of the board at this time to do that, or if there's another mechanism, which is what you've proposed, Ms. Davis and Dr.
Well, I want us to get to that world where we're a team of 10, and so administration definitely has some work to do in this, and so I would love to see it prioritized as a thing for the board. And again, if they're already working on things, and obviously you didn't know that was happening, it sounds like there needs to be something that guides our work here. I don't want us to go down this path of cherry picking them one at a time and not looking at the complete picture to make sure that we get it right the first time, because it just results in a lot of rework, in my opinion. So I'm certainly willing to sit here and talk about all of these, but I would think that there should have been some preparation to say these are the things that are already currently happening, and these are the things that are an overlap between the other survey. So this doesn't seem to me like we're ready to have a discussion. That's just my opinion. Yes.
Well, what is the plan for the information from the survey? Or how is that being summarized? Or
So it has been compiled, and I thought Dr. Gant shared that with everyone, but I may be making that up, so I apologize if I am. I know that the recommendation had been that possibly that advisory group would let that be one of their first tasks, was going through that information and trying to synthesize and see what the top areas were and identifying some key areas to start with, and then work through. And how do you all as a board, because really it's the board survey, so how do you all want to address that work and begin moving forward in a way of priority, because anytime like this, it's broad and there are a lot of asks of the
Mhm.
board, a lot of asks of the district. So determining where we prioritize and what is it that we want to begin with, or that the board wants to begin with as areas of focus. So that was my understanding from Dr. Gant.
Okay. I do think that she sent it to us in that raw form. I just
Yes,
didn't
I
know
was
if
trying
there
to-
was.
It's
I
a August,
remember-
or it's a August 25th
remember
email.
some-
August
Okay.
25th. She sent it to
Okay.
all of us,
Okay.
Dr. Thomas and
But
Ms.
I
Palmer.
thought she also said that she was going to follow up with GSBA in terms of coming up with a best practice to
Mhm.
how do we dissect this information. And so
Right.
again, I think that's a piece of information. I think the forum that you guys had was a piece of information. And also I think that now that we have an advisory council, that's a piece of information. And so all three of these things are targeting the one thing, and that is the board community relations. Is that right? And so, I mean, at some point, there has to be something, either a strategic initiative that's driving that, or we have to define what it is that's driving that, so that, again, we don't piece part it and keep revisiting this thing over and over again. I think it would be better to take it as a whole. That's just my recommendation. So, you guys, I think your committee is taking the lead on this, and so I think you define that. I think you work with Dr. Thomas and staff to define the way forward.
But see, I think the problem is, I mean, part of the issue that we have with Cognia is the fact that we did not have that that community input. If I'm correct in that.
I'm not sure that I understood that to be the whole, again.
No, it's not the whole-
It's a piece, it's a symptom.
Yeah.
Of our dysfunction, I would say. But again, I think, tackling that piece by piece without looking at the three initiatives or the three things that we've done to try and address that as a whole is no better than, again, we're going for that low hanging fruit and it won't solve our problem. So I'm looking for that holistic approach that answers the concern that Cognia gave to us, and that concern is driven by our responsibilities as a board.
I don't see kicking this back to the government and community relations
And it's
committee.
okay not to go there, but again, if it's thing that the whole board needs to participate in, then I'm fine with that too.
Yeah, I
We
think
have to do
in
that.
her email, Dr. Gant mentions getting GSBA or someone to help us facilitate a conversation
Right.
about this.
Yeah.
And I just assumed it would be one of these Thursday nights when we didn't otherwise have a meeting, but maybe
Yep.
I don't know if those are still happening. I still have them on my calendar. It's sort of delightful to delete them every once in a while. But anyway,
But a whole board discussion.
a whole board. Yeah, I agree.
Facilitated by GSBA.
Mhm.
Or
That's kinda
someone.
how
It
I
doesn't
can-
necessarily need to be GSBA, but
Okay,
yeah,
doesn't
someone.
have to be them, but facilitated discussion would be. Would
Yeah.
that be acceptable to you, Mr. Davis?
Again, I mean, it's the will of the board if that's what they want to do. But I'm looking for a whole board discussion that is public. Generally,
Sure.
even though the GSBA meetings are certainly available to the public, people don't generally attend trainings of other boards. Whereas having a board meeting where it's well publicized and people expect it on the first and second Thursdays of the month makes it more of a community discussion as opposed to a committee meeting, for instance, that only the committee members are there and the staff,
Okay.
or with GSBA. So, I mean, we can table this. We can, we can. I would like to leave it on the agenda for next week, if we don't feel like, because we are missing two members, and so I'm cognizant of that.
Honestly, still don't
But
see
I would like to see us actually have an agenda item. I don't know what our agenda looks like for next week, but I would like us to have a formal agenda in terms of what can this board do differently, and some of it does involve, in terms of the staff to kind of help us. For instance, we ourselves cannot put anything on the website in which,
And I don't think we can do anything without, again, a plan. And so I'm going to ask, we've talked about this for like 22 minutes and we haven't really moved beyond the need to have it as an agenda item that the full board discusses and moves forward with. So rather than continue down that path, can we table this until Dr. Thomas and the executive committee, which would be the president and vice president, can carve out that recommendation for it being on the agenda and a path forward to synthesize all of the information to address it. Is that reasonable?
I would like to propose it for next week's agenda then, with the consent of this
So what's
board.
the action item?
What would happen?
I'm confused. Next week's agenda is all about action items and voting something up or down. What would we be voting on?
Good point. So we don't have. So the
Oh,
idea is
plan.
not to have discussion.
Yeah, we shouldn't be doing that at
Okay.
the
So
board
so
meeting.
this is the proper.
This is the
proper-
work session. Yeah.
so
And
this is the
I think there's a lot of support for a lot of these items, if I can speak beyond myself, but I mean, just the feeling of those, that World Cafe that you set up, I think there was a lot of good conversations there. And so there's a lot of support for these items. It's just how do we go about doing them? And I think we have to eat the elephant one bite at a time, if I can use the metaphor. We've got to figure out what the action items are and then put them up is what I would encourage. But I don't know what the action item is.
We've done that.
These aren't
But-
really action items, are they, that we're voting on?
I mean, we could turn them into.
Well, then that's what we should do and then put them on the next agenda.
Can I say something? I don't think the issue is whether or not to, what the Government Relations Committee has already done with this piece of information from the meeting that we had. I think the issue is that we also have feedback from the surveys, and we also have an advisory committee where we'll also get feedback. And so I think that what I was hearing from Dr. Thomas and also Ms. Davis is that we should get all of that information and then look at it in conjunction with the information from the government relations meeting, and then come up with action items, taking all of that feedback from those three different sources instead of just looking at the feedback and taking action on the items from one of the three things.
I agree with that. I think that's the most efficient use of our time and how we make sure we're incorporating everything.
And I think it will allow the parts of this and from the other feedback that we've gotten to help district staff prioritize that work, because as we've talked about before, if we aren't careful and we're jumping and being responsive to different sets of feedback, then nothing is done in a comprehensive and strategic way. So, if we stop and say, okay, let's go work on this now on the website, and then we get other feedback, well, let's stop and go work on this, and then it's still not aligned with their strategic plans, which, like me, that's what they're evaluated on. Like, how do we maintain? And that's something that Dr. Gannon, Dr. Maddox, and I had discussed, and we had discussed as a group, making sure that we decide what's the priority and what's the focus, and not just kind of being reactive and being here and here and here and not doing anything well. So for us to be able to do, and I think many of these things, if not all of these things, are of significant value, but I also don't want to stop the team and say, well, stop working on this now, stop working on the activity in the park that we're doing to now start working on this. Let's not do the trail work because we're going to do this work. So just making sure that it's comprehensive and thoughtful and planned out. So I agree. I think it allows us to look at all the feedback and then prioritize, because we can't do everything in 1 month or even in 1 year. So what are our high yield items that we can address and do well, and then move down to the next, and people can see that we're prioritizing that work.
Excellent. Then if there's no further discussion, I don't think it's necessarily tabled, but I think I did hear that we need to do some additional work on this before we're ready to move forward. So table, if that's the correct word, then it's tabled, but until we have that conversation from the executive team. Anything else, Mr. Davis? Thank you. Fiscal responsibility, we have not met this month. We will meet on the 4th. I think this will be our last meeting. We'll meet the 4th month and Thursday in October. And at that meeting, we hope to be able to put some definition around what we think the scope of that committee's work should be, if that still survives our plans around committees. Accountability.
All I wanted to say is just a reminder that we're having a meeting on Monday, a full board called meeting on Monday from 6 to 8 to go through the evaluation. And then there will be another meeting, hopefully either the 21st or the 28th, where we will meet with Dr. Thomas. But that hasn't been scheduled yet.
Could we schedule that today? Since we're all here.
I'm fine with that. The only thing was that Lakeisha thought that there might be a professional learning on one of those days, but then I saw her email that said that it might be November instead. So if we want to choose one of those days and make sure that Dr. Thomas is available, I'm totally open to doing that.
And I'm in both of those meetings, though, right? Monday and the 28th.
No, you don't have to come to the Monday.
Oh, I'm
meeting.
not Monday. I will take.
But
you
the
off my
one on
calendar.
the one on the
miss y'all.
21st or 28th, you will be.
So disappointed. Okay, got it. That's you all's work time to prepare for the
So
next
can
one.
we schedule that meeting with 2 members absent today? We can get the 7 of us on the table. On the
Lakeisha had said both of those are available.
okay.
for
and what
her,
about
so-
Dr.
I don't know about Dr.
Dr.
Maddox.
Maddox?
So could you say what the 2 tentative times were, at least so we can pencil them in?
October 21st or October 28th. They're both Thursdays, so just I
Okay.
guess regular time, 6 o'clock. But I'm open.
Pick a date. 28th would be fiscal responsibility.
21st is policy.
Policy at 4:30. So this would be at 6?
Mhm.
Okay. For some reason, I have called board meeting at 6 on the 21st of October. Is that something we did? Never mind.
I don't know. Okay. So I thought the call board meeting was following the policy committee meeting. And what was it for? If it wasn't for this, I thought it was for this.
That was for this.
I don't know.
So the 21st was the date that you had picked earlier? Does anybody else have that date? Okay.
I don't see anywhere where it says there's a call meeting on the 21st.
Mm-mm.
It would be, okay, all right.
On the calendar, there's nothing. There's the policy committee meeting on the 21st at 4:30, and then on the 28th it says 5 p.m. fiscal responsibility, 6 p.m. board professional development.
Yeah.
But I don't know that there's anything actually scheduled for that this month.
Okay. So are we trying to choose the 21st or 28th?
I think so.
Huh?
I think that's what we're trying to do.
Okay.
Does
I'll
anyone?
go with whatever works for the majority.
Me too.
I can do either one.
I'm going for the 21st. Because I think that 28th, if we don't have something for board professional development, that might be the perfect opportunity to address this other concern.
And the
Just kick down
28th
the
is
calendar.
actually the couple of reasons we may not want to do the 28th. It is the beginning of sort of fall break.
Oh yeah.
Going into the Georgia, Florida, kids are out that Friday, and it's also the rescheduled. It was on my list to talk about, or just to tell you, the rescheduled Clark Cedar game that had to be canceled from the first game
Mm.
of the season because of COVID was moved to that Thursday, the 28th.
Oh,
As
okay.
well.
I mean, the 21st seemed like it was okay with everyone. We can say the 21st.
All right.
Good. So 1021 is with the superintendent?
Yes,
Thank you.
at 6 o'clock after the policy committee meeting.
Okay. And the fiscal responsibility committee will have a conversation with you, Dr. Thomas, about is it necessary for us to move that meeting as well.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
And then that takes care of item 4, board committee reports. Is there any other discussion around that? Moving to item 5, board community reports. Athens Area Community Foundation. Is that Dr. Maddox? Okay. And the Community Oversight Committee.
So I was not at the last meeting. I can't remember why, but there is the minutes of the meeting were provided by Gerald, so you can read the minutes of the meeting. The folks are very concerned about the impact of the West Broad vote on future raising of East Blossom money. They were really, really worried about it. So I think they're keeping their eye on what we do about the school. Any other comments, Mr. Davis? You were there at the meeting, I believe. No, I think the meeting's notes speak for themselves.
No further discussion? Great. Envision, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, no, I was going for Envision
Envision
Athens.
Athens. Okay.
And so I can also provide the meeting minutes and put that into board docs. I have asked Ms. Palmer to do so. Envision Athens is now incorporated. The 501c3 paperwork has been submitted to the IRS, but there has not been a confirmation. Right now, the search is on for an executive director or president. Once that has been completed, then they'll start to develop a strategic plan or guidelines.
Okay. Thank you. I'll call that progress. Okay. Excellent. Georgia School Boards Association. No report. Now, we did get a notice from Ms. Palmer that the conference for this year, that date has been set. So that if you'll check your emails in case, we've never gone to this as a board, and I think that would be a lot, but still there might be something very valuable in there, especially as people are looking at how we're reimagining education. So I'm not sure, what the agenda looks like for the conference this year.
I do have a question. Just as a new board member, what is, what has been the protocol for how we select to go to conferences? Are there any specific conferences that we attend as a board? Is the idea to attend different conferences and bring the information back? How has that been approached?
Historically, from my experience, we've tried to we've managed who attends by what's left in your account. So we always had a budget set up for each board member. I don't think we've ever spent the money that's been set aside for that. There was public perception that we would be treating it like some type of holiday if all of us showed up for like the Savannah particular one that usually happens in the summer in places like that. So other than public opinion, I don't think there are any there's no guidance that I've seen. What about you, Mr. Davis? Do you remember experiencing any?
I think one of the mistakes that this board has made over the years is, particularly in terms of the National School Board Association, there are some boards that go en masse because they see learning from what's happening around the country as very valuable, and there's some great workshops. Typically, pre-COVID, there would be two of us who would attend, and it would generally be the same two. It used to be three, but then Mr. Payne, when he got sick, had to step away. So I think that's just a missed opportunity. There's also within the Georgia School Board Association, the National School Board Association, there are also associations of board members of color that have been very, very active around the issues of equity, and we've never really availed ourselves to that. They have their own separate membership within the National School Board Association. So, but I guess what we got today was on the Georgia School Board Association, which I'm not trying to lower the value of, but in terms of the national, I know we're going to start getting information around the first of the year about that. And I don't know if that's going to be virtual or in person.
Ms. Palmer said that normally the budget includes 2 for National School Board and 2 for Georgia School Board, just because of the travel and expense. But if there are times when more than 2 want to go, we just make that adjustment. But the normal planning is usually 2 representatives for each.
And then again, that was simply the leadership of the board and just the agreement that we didn't want to appear to be frivolous and wasteful of the taxpayers' money is that was the message that was given to me when I came on board. Again, I don't know that there's anything that precludes us from going because we don't typically spend our travel allowance every year. But that's my opinion. Moving to advisory board reports, item 6.1, Superintendent Advisory Board.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Davis, I can actually speak to all 4 of these.
Excellent.
The Superintendent's Advisory Board did meet, and Dr. Gant shared an overview of that, I believe, with everyone. Did that come to everyone?
Mm-hmm.
It was just about, did it just go to you, Ms. Davis and Dr. Maddox? Just about, okay. And in essence, it was what we've already talked about, how those representatives will come, and I'll talk about that really briefly in my report, and that the group, we will start having reports coming out of that group each month. And she was asking for 2, I think, board members to serve on that committee, so they'll be able to bring back reports for that group. The Student Advisory Council, we had our first meeting last week, and it was awesome. Kids are so energetic and excited and just so smart, and it was just refreshing to be with them, and they have great ideas. So we will begin having, Ms. Bones will have a monthly report from that group, because we will meet 7 times this year. And our plan is to have them come and have you all meet them and just kind of make a big deal around their involvement and present that entire group to you all. Parent Advisory had their first meeting on Tuesday of this week, and Ms. Bones attended that as well. And this was their first time meeting this year, and I think they're working just out some kinks about meeting times and setting priorities and what their focus will be. So they will begin getting us a report. And then Teacher Advisory is moving along. We had a meeting with them, with all of the principals yesterday, to talk about a survey that they want to put out, asking, what do the teachers enjoy about where they are? What are challenges? How can they better be supported? What are needs in their buildings? So the leadership team met with the principals just to kind of do a reset of, this is a collaborative work, and that it's not an antagonistic type of relationship, but a place where teachers have voice, and that we work together to ensure that it's a positive environment for all of our teachers, students, parents, leaders as well. And I felt like that meeting went really well yesterday. And so, Miss Erica, I just drew a blank. Thank you. I just completely forgot Erica's last name. Douglas Green is the president of that group, and she will be submitting monthly reports moving forward as well.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you for that work.
Yes, and we've had a few meetings with them as their leadership team, and then with the entire group. But coming out of those meetings was a request to speak with principals and say, we're not here against you, but there are things that we want to have a voice for. So that was the purpose of yesterday's meeting.
That's really good. Thank you. So now, do we have board representation on these, and is that part of our requirement here? Because I had someone here.
Dr. Dykeman, you used to go with me to TAB, right?
And by used to, I went one time
Oh.
when we were going to, no, when we, Parent Advisory Board, we were just starting to rotate through board members. And so a different board member was going to go each month. And then we stopped having meetings because of COVID. And then that is the last.
Yes.
So I think that is what we had talked about, was for Parent Advisory Board, rotating through board members so that everybody could have an opportunity to meet
Make
the
a
Parent
connection
Advisory Board and
Mr. Reed.
listen.
We'll get you connected with the president, and then you can pass that on to.
Okay.
You want
But I don't know about Teacher Advisory Board. I don't know if there was ever
So
any.
no, okay, so for PAB, did we agree to continue that rotation process, or is that where we are?
I think so, because I signed I just remember my name going under that one, and then the conversation was about rotation, and I was like, I don't get to stay permanent on anything. So I hope there's a rotation because everybody needs to hear from.
Yeah, that was, well, in my previous experience, that was the board president and the superintendent keeping up with whose turn it was to go. So they
Okay.
just set the calendar and just reminded us each month on who was going next month on the
Okay.
parent advisory board for sure. I don't know about the tab.
I don't think we
because that just
had
started.
anyone on tab, did we, Mr. Haskins? But then the first one, the board advisory committee, rather than board, I guess would be better to say, we
Mhm.
do need 2 representatives for that.
So I don't know how you guys want to do that. We can wait and do that next month, next week. But just be aware that Dr. Gantz did send in her memo that I forwarded to you that they are looking for 2 board members to commit to serving on the first one. I'm sorry, what now?
Karina and Kara, yeah.
She did say that she mentioned it to us, and that mention was a literal mention. We happened to be standing there at the end of a meeting while she was talking to Dr. Thomas about it, and so we were listening. And then it was like, oh, look, you're both here. So
So then, do we have 2 people already? Oh, I don't know. I'm asking the question too. But
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that was her.
If I recall correctly, I think she was saying that maybe if we had a representative from the government community
Mhm.
relations committee, and then maybe someone from the accountability, just it seemed like it fit with those 2 existing committees. If in that, is that what you said, Ms. Gallagher?
Mhm. And I am willing to do it. I just if someone else really wanted to do it. Is this on?
Okay.
It looks like it's on, but I don't. Oh.
okay.
That's okay.
All right. And so that's going to be for the. Which one is this? The student. The
Superintendent.
superintendent advisory board advisory. Okay.
Board
So
advisory
that's
board.
someone from government relations that I hear, and someone from. Okay, that's easy.
So I'd be willing to volunteer if we need an alternate or someone that doesn't want to do it.
Wow, you're a busy lady.
I am. And I
Government
wouldn't be able to do
someone
it
from
until
government
March, so
relations
it's
and
probably not a
someone
good idea.
from accountability is what I heard.
Okay, I would like the opportunity to raise it at our next Government and Community Relations Committee meeting.
None of the mics are working.
Say that again.
I would like the opportunity to, I would recommend, boy, startling. Somebody's
He's
giving me
working
some
on it.
help. I would like to take that to our next Government and Community Relations Committee meeting for discussion and a nomination out of that committee.
And so I'm going to recommend that it be rotated as we're doing with PAB. So there are 3 things to consider now. Okay, cool. All right. So however we get those 2, again, to rotate it would give everybody an opportunity to have the exposure to the community's input firsthand, as opposed to having 2 people come back and tell us their interpretation of what the community wants firsthand. So I would totally recommend the rotation there, especially if we're going to be moving away from committees. So that would be my recommendation. Okay. Thank you very much. And we are now down to item 7. That is the board president's report. And Dr. Gant did share the notes with me. I forwarded those to you this afternoon. I'm afraid as soon as I got them, I did send them to you. And it just simply mentions these items. If you've has anyone not had a chance to read that email?
Do we need to act? Sorry. Do we need to act on the ad hoc committee? Like create it or vote to create it?
I would suggest that we defer that to next week when we have the president who has that power
Okay.
to create that ad hoc committee is here. Because I don't think that transfers to me sitting here temporarily. Okay. So I would suggest that, again, if you have some ideas about that, then definitely follow up with Dr. Gant. Okay. Yeah, I think we're good there. Is there anyone else Did anyone not get a chance to read the note? And is there anything in there you want to talk about? Yes. Uh-huh. Mhm. Okay. Okay. Super. I will make a note and make sure that she gets that update. Thank you. Superintendent's report, item 8.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry, I was writing down what Dr. Anderson said as well. Loudly. Okay, and I am short. The Athens Community Career Academy, we always have 2 joint meetings per year. And our first one for this year is tentatively scheduled for November 4th. It will be at 4:45. Ms. Palmer will get you additional information, but that is with their board. And that is when they normally provide some update just to us about their work and focus and priorities for the year. I don't know what happened. The vaccine update, we currently have over 1,700 staff members who have submitted proof of vaccination. And that's out of a little over 2,400 staff members. So we're really excited about that. The first checks will go out on October 30th for those individuals who have submitted verification of vaccination. So that is that update. I already told you the Clark Cedar rescheduled game is October 28th. On our agenda tonight, we are supposed to approve the names for the advisory committee participants. I'm just going to ask that we pull that from consent and just make it an action item next week, only because there were some people who did not attend that first meeting. And I want us to have the opportunity to reach out to them directly and make sure that they did not attend because they're no longer interested, or did they have a conflict? Because I don't want us to approve a group and then people come back and say, no, I really wanted to be there. I was sick. I had something with work. So I just want to make sure that everyone who received that initial communication about participating, we're able to confirm their availability to do so. So we're making those direct contacts now. And so I will have those list of names to you before next Thursday's meeting. But I just wanted to pull it off of consent since I'm not 100% confident that we have thoroughly vetted that list. And my only other was just an update on our virtual school from Mr. Gaskins, and he's just going to give a very quick update on where we are with virtual school.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. So we are currently this week registering our students, our kindergarten through 8th grade students for virtual school. The registration will end tomorrow. Currently, yesterday we had 64 students that were registered for virtual school, and that number may increase. We've asked principals and teachers to support our parents through parent conferences this week if they had any questions around virtual school. So we will have updated numbers, and I will put that in the board update tomorrow. So again, proximity learning will be providing instruction for our K through 8th grade students. Although proximity learning will be providing instruction, the student's status will remain as a CCSD student, and we will be providing some asynchronous instruction in our fine arts and PE from our CCSD teachers. So although they'll have proximity teachers in their core areas, they will have CCSD teachers for art, PE, music. We are asking parents that enroll in virtual school to remain as virtual students into the end of the semester. In December, they do have the option to extend for the full year, or they may choose to go back to face-to-face instruction in January. Our coordinator of virtual learning, his name is Dana Sigmund. He is the primary contact for all the questions related to virtual school. I met with him this morning. He's doing an amazing job. We have created a virtual learning email address. He's answered all of those emails that have come to that email address, as well as emails that have come to him directly. So if parents have questions or any concerns around virtual learning, they can contact Mr. Sigmund. His information is on our website, or they can email the virtual learning. It's virtual learning at Clark Schools. What is it? clark.k12.ga.us at our regular email moniker, virtual learning, and he will get back with them as soon as possible.
I had a question. Do we have a timeline for 9 through 12 for virtual schooling?
9 through 12. So we have students in 9 through 12 that are already in our virtual
The first group
classes.
has already started? How
For
many?
9 through 12.
Oh, okay. Thank
Yes.
you. I didn't know that. How many students do you know?
149. Ms. Gallagher asked me, and I have that number ingrained in my head. They started at the beginning of the year. They started in August. We will expand some additional virtual classes for our high school students next semester. There is a need for some senior courses, economics, and some other courses that our 11th and 12th graders take, and we'll be adding those courses next semester.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And you said 64 are enrolled for the spring currently?
Not
The K through 8?
K through 8 will be in, we're registering them now. They will be enrolled for the rest of this semester and then have the option to extend for the rest of the year if they choose to do so.
And what was that number again?
We have 64 students so far.
64, okay.
Yes, ma'am. No school has more than 10 students enrolled so far. The majority of these students are middle school students. We have about 11 students at 2 middle schools, which is our highest number. Some schools have 2 or 3. Some schools have none.
Can we support additional students?
We can. So
Is
we
there-
have a enrollment of about 200. We have about 200 seats so far. If that number exceeds, we have an option to add more seats. It's a little more complicated past that 200 number, but we do have space comfortably to up to 200.
Thanks.
And I
Ye-
said this somewhere this week, I can't remember where it was.
Your mic's not on.
Thank you, Mr. Gaskins. That we are working with RISA, and I don't know what group I was meeting with. Who was I meeting with? Oh, with the principals. I told, I'm like, who did I felt like I'd already said this to you all and didn't want to be redundant, but it was principals I was talking to. So we are working with RISA to on a virtual school collaboration for the 13 counties in our area. And so they have hired a coordinator who's one of our actually current/former media specialists that is leading that work for RISA. And they are working to develop a K-5 virtual school that would not have to involve like a different provider, but that we would be able to staff as a 13 county RISA group together. So that is in the works. She has already been hired by them with the hopes of that being able to kick off at the beginning of the 22-23 school year.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, moving right along. We are now to item 9-1, which is the charter presentation.
Yes, so Mr. Harris and Mr. Nobles are back. They gave us a very thorough overview the last time they presented of all the steps that were necessary for us to move forward with our charter renewal. And if you all recall, they gave an overview of what the options were. Either we would be charter or what our other options were. And they gave us a calendar of the different activities that would have to take place for us to move forward. So they are back now, aligned with that calendar for the next step.
That we are. So we will share a mic. Good evening. Ms. Davis and the rest of the Board of Education, who's leading the meeting, Dr. Thomas. We're here to talk to you all a bit about the charter system contract renewal. As Dr. Thomas mentioned, this is a connection from our last meeting in September. And so our goals tonight, if the clicker, oh, there we go. Okay, there we go. We had goals. All right, well, our goals tonight when it gets there is just to discuss with you our charter system contract currently, where we are, some of our innovations and waivers, highlight some of the achievements that have been made through our LSGTs. We then provide some data on our current contract and then explain what the charter system contract renewal process will look like. Ultimately, we're providing this information with the goals to the Board of Education because we are seeking charter system contract renewal. In order to even begin that process of working with our community members, our school leaders, and our LSGTs, we have to get a, this PowerPoint is just making its own little thing. Yeah, can you just click it for me? Right there, thank you. In order to do this, we have to first get a resolution from the Board of Education. This resolution is not the contract. It will not have any language around that these are the things we're committing ourselves to, but the resolution by the board gets sent to the state that allows us to even begin the process of meeting with our LSGTs, speaking with principals, community members, and stakeholders about our contract. That's part of the charter contract renewal process that's been in place for the past 3 years. And so in order for our team and our office to even start, you have to get a resolution. So next week we'll be seeking that resolution. The document will be signed by, if approved by the board, by Dr. Gant and Dr. Thomas. We'll send that to the state, and that will put us on the list so that way the state board knows to expect our contract within the next 10 months. So we have conducted a SWOT analysis briefly just to kind of talk a bit about what are some of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of our current charter system contract. There are a lot of strengths, so we wanted just to highlight some of the ones that came to the top. The decentralized decision-making, hence through our local governance teams at our school level, has proven to be a very effective model, giving voice to parents, community members, and staff. We do say staff because we are very conscious of ensuring that not just teachers, we do invite other staff members in the building to be a part of our LSGT. So we do have members of our LSGTs who are not teachers, who may be serving in other non-certified positions. And so we think that decentralized decision-making has truly shown itself to be effective at the school level, helping to bring that voice from the community and from the school to the table. Of course, as a charter system, we have broad flexibility versus if we were a Swiss waiver system, which is the other option. We would have to apply every single time we wanted to use a waiver for flexibility. Luckily, we are a charter system, so we can just use our flexibility to do what's best for our kids. There has been increased community engagement as many of our LSGTs have focused their attention, their meetings on ensuring that the voices of their school community has been heard. We've worked really closely with Tim Johnson and our neighborhood leaders. We have a neighborhood leader on each of our elementary LSGTs as an at-large member. That has really been something our LSGTs have loved, that voice that they've brought to the table, bringing the voice of the neighborhood to the table and helping them to understand what data points they may not see on paper. You know, we get the data of student achievement, but some of our neighborhood leaders have been able to really build that bridge to what's actually happening in the neighborhoods, at home, and with our families. I won't read all of these, just want to let you know if I'm going through each bullet point. But we already have the LSGTs in place. That's a benefit, that's a strength. We do have, of course, our full-time governance and flexibility specialist, Mr. Nobles here, who's helping to support that work. And we do receive additional funding from the state for being a charter system. So that is something we continue to receive every year. So we like to use those funds. As y'all know, we allot more than 80% of those dollars to the local school governance teams to develop school-based innovations. Some of the weaknesses are areas of improvement. It's a SWOT, so they call it weaknesses, but for me, it's an area of improvement. We are looking at how do we embed our charter system work throughout all of our practices, understanding that we are really just in the beginning, similar to other districts who are charter systems. The first 5 years, Stephen and I have gotten a chance to meet with some other charter systems who have also talked about what is it like to be a charter system your first 5. You know, you kind of claim in your contract, you can do all these amazing things, and then the world happens, things happen, there's leadership transition, there's a pandemic, there's all these things that occur. And so how do we make sure that we embed and drive our charter system work, not just at our school level, but through all the departments that exist within our district? Another area of improvement for us is we're looking at systems to track and measure the impacts of our flexibility. So we have the flexibility, we have these waivers, but how do we know that it is truly impacting student achievement? So that's something that Mr. Nobles and I have talked about at length about how do we make sure we're measuring the impact of this charter contract so that way we can ensure that we can attribute our success to the flexibility that we're awarded by the state. We do want to also increase the understanding from our community around what does it mean to be a charter system. So we've been doing a lot of brainstorming around how do we get information to our local community members so that way they understand we're a charter system and what that means so that we can get input from them along the way. And then we have been visiting a lot of districts through Zoom, just talking about their innovations, their waivers, some of the things they've been doing in their districts. And so we want to be able to bring those practices to our district, to our LSGTs, and to our central office staff so that we can look at the best ways to serve our kids. So some of the opportunities, again, we're going to refine the work of our Charter Advisory Committee. We do have a Charter Advisory Committee, which helps to drive kind of our work at the central office. It's kind of our mini version of an LSGT that meet with Mr. Nobles and myself. So we're looking at redefining their work. We want to highlight LSGT innovations. If the board remembers, we did do a grant annual report probably a month ago, and I just showed you all some of the grants that our LSGTs have done at the school level. So we'll be resharing that in the board update next week. We have opportunities to engage our community. The exciting part about the renewal process is that it's been done before. And so the state has guidance and they help us to really see how this new contract really should involve the voice of not just school administrators and current LSGT members, but also your parents, your stakeholders outside the walls of the school. So they're going to help us conduct those focus groups to really think about how do we create a contract that's in alignment with our strategic plan. Some of the threats, though, too, we can really locate our state laws are versatile. As we know we're still in the midst of a pandemic. As we know, we don't know the unknown impact of COVID-19 on our state budget. We have talked and spoken with our representatives. There has not been any discussion about cutting funds to charter system work, mainly because they're seeing positive impacts of that work. And so it's still a threat because you just never know. That's the state of politics. So we will continue to monitor that and report as necessary. I did just want to show this slide. This work is aligned with Strategic Priority 2.3, the goal of which is to maximize school governance and flexibility, ultimately to promote and support our student outcomes. Okay, and we went ahead one, but let's go. We can go back one more. The last slide I'll talk about it's cool. That's the slide that actually we showed you in September, and it was just again a comparison of the charter system contract, charter systems to the Swiss Waiver 2 systems. It's probably two slides back or three, but it's fine. Basically, what it's going to say is the amount of money we receive for being a charter system. As you all know, of course, we receive funding. We have local school governance teams in place as a Swiss waiver system. Thank you. We are granted broad flexibility to waive many of the laws in Title 20. As a Swiss waiver district, we don't have shared governance. Most of the governance returns back to the central office and to the office of the superintendent. We would not have, of course, LSGTs in place. And then the goals of our district will be set by the governor's office of student achievement instead of by individual schools. So there are differences and key differences between the two. The thing I did mention to the board last month was that while there has not been a charter system that has become a strategic waiver system, there have been now at this point 11 strategic waiver systems that have converted to charter systems, mainly because of that broad flexibility and funding that's provided. So by going to a Swiss waiver system, it's actually limited flexibility, no funding, and then all of the decision-making becomes back centralized instead of at the school level. Ms. Holt, can we hold on to this or do you? Okay. All right, I'm going to pass the torch to Mr. Nobles, who will talk to you through our contract.
So like Lauren said, in the annual report, we highlighted a lot of our district innovations, some of the things that schools were doing. So tonight, we just wanted to spotlight these three, starting with Oglethorpe Avenue, who started a dual learning immersion program where they're teaching their English and Spanish speaking students English and Spanish simultaneously. The students are learning 80% in Spanish and 20% in English. And at the conclusion of this program, they will be proficient in both. They will be both bilingual and biliterate. Next, we have Barnett Shoals, whose LSGT used grant funds and flexibility to implement Franklin Covey's Leader in Me program based on a book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Since their success program, we've had 4 more schools to implement this program moving forward. Those schools will begin next school year. And last, we wanted to spotlight the Athens Community Career Academy, who allows their students to take dual enrollment, including their option B. You can go to the next slide, Lisa. So we thought it would be impactful for you guys to hear directly from some of our current LSGT members in a segment that we titled Why I Serve. The first video is from Erwin Green. He's a community member and co-chair for Hillsman Middle School. So let's hear from Erwin.
My name is Erwin Green. I am the co-chair / community member of the Hillsman Middle School LSTT. I choose to serve for multiple reasons. Key among those is I believe I have to be active as a parent in my child's life, education, and I am there to support the teachers and the administration and ensure that my child gets the education that they need.
Awesome. So next we have Leslie Hale, who is a parent and co-chair for Barnett Shoals Elementary's LSGT.
My name is Leslie Hale. I am a parent on the Barnett Shoals Elementary School, LSGT, and I serve because our school and community are as vibrant and dynamic as the children who attend at our school. But we always know that we can develop more programming, more supports to make their experience at our school more vibrant and more dynamic, and to serve our entire community more fully.
Thank you for all the running, Lawrence. And definitely last but not least is my buddy, Ludwig Lettrick. He attended our LSGT University, the only student. So he's a student serving on the LSGT for Clark Central High School.
Hello, my name is Ludwig Lettrick, and I'm a student representative for the Clark Central LSGT. And I choose to serve because I want to provide a voice for students who may not traditionally have that voice. And I think that it's imperative that students get more of a voice in the way their schools develop, because, I mean, students are the ones who are going to be feeling the impact of those changes on a day-to-day basis. So I think that the more student voices we have, the more we can have our school fine-tuned to their needs. And yeah.
So next, we wanted to bring up the charter system contract. You can click on that, Lisa, and go to, I think it's one page down on page 6 and 7, maybe 7. So basically, we just wanted to take a look at the contract system. Many of the goals and expectations in our current contract were met. However, while we did not meet all of the goals set, it is important to note that this is not just unique to CCSD. With many factors like the pandemic, along with district, central office, and school leadership changes, this provided a certain amount of barriers to meeting all of the goals outlined in our contract, and we realized that there are opportunities for improvement. So moving forward, we're going to be working with our contractor to make sure that our next contract contains innovations that align with our district's strategic plans. With the input of our community stakeholders, district staff, principals, students, and you guys, our board. You can go back, Ms. Lisa.
So what we want to show here is just a snapshot of data. We know the board receives data regularly, and so you all see our student achievement data. What we decided to pull here was just 2017 to 2019. You know, one of the main goals of being a charter system is to impact student achievement. And as Mr. Noble said, you know, we had several innovations listed in our last charter system contract. While we did meet about 4 to 5 of them, there were at least 6 or 7 that were outstanding. That is not unique to Clark. We've talked, like he said, we have spoken with other charter systems. Again, you know, the first time it rolled out, everyone was excited. You're listing all these things you want to do. Similar to our strategic plan this year, we want to now be very laser focused. What are the things we're saying we want to do? And that's become at the recommendation of our contractor, who was a previous superintendent as well, to say, as a district, as a community, what are those few buckets you all want to see, you all want to hit, so that way you all can innovate in order to drive student achievement. So this slide here, the blue being Clark County, just shows our student achievement, you know, kind of dipped in 2018 and rose back in 2019. It's just a snapshot of 3 years of the time by which we were a charter system. You know, in hindsight, I guess I could have added 1 more year, but I just wanted to show you all a snapshot of what our achievement looked like during this time. Our next slide really goes into how we're going to move forward as a charter system. And so I'm going to talk through the timeline, and then we'll pass it back to Mr. Nobles to kind of talk through what our next steps are going to be. So this was reviewed in September. Right now we're here looking for support for the board resolution and the letter of intent from Dr. Thomas. In October through November, after the board is taken, if it's in support of the charter system contract, Mr. Nobles and myself will hit the ground running. We will be meeting with several groups, a lot of groups between October and November, including yourselves as the board, just to start getting input on what do we want to see in the next contract? What are the greatest areas of need? It'll all be aligned to our strategic plan, so aligned to our 5 strategic priorities. And so we'll be meeting with our LSGTs, we'll be meeting with those co-chairs, we'll be meeting with our community groups and focus groups to ensure that we're getting all the information we need to complete and have a very robust but very detailed application. December through January will be application writing time. They do recommend a little over a month to write the application. It is not a short task or easy task. We'll have to get a lot of feedback from our state contractors about what details we should provide and not provide. And then in February or in January, the Board of Education here should receive a copy of that contract. So you all can review, you can ask questions. So that way, if there are any edits or revisions we need to make in our office, we can do so. And then in February, we would bring that before you to seek approval of the application. In March, we will submit that application to the state. In late March, the Department of Education, as well as their Charter Advisory Committee, which is made up of several superintendents and charter advisory personnel from across the state, will do a virtual visit. Currently it's virtual based off of the pandemic. It could be in person, but right now they plan for it to be virtual. And at that visit, they will ask us about our current contract, what we have now listed in our new contract, and what we hope to accomplish as a charter system moving forward. Once that visit is conducted and complete in April, we will send that contract, or they will upload that contract to the State Board of Education, who will then vote out on it during their April meeting, with goals that in May we will receive that notification and we would officially become a charter system again, or renewed as a charter system July 1 of 2022. So again, I just wanted to show that, part of this work is not just, Mr. Nobles and myself, coming up with this. It is aligned in our strategic plan. This isn't, something we just pulled out the air. We did extend the board did choose to extend the charter system contract for 1 year throughout the pandemic, which we are very grateful for. Now I have a teammate here who can help in this process, and it's not a one-man show, so we can really get out there and do this work and do it right. And I think the last few slides are around the strategic focus.
Yeah, so we just wanted to highlight some of the things that I will be focusing on moving forward. Like Mr. Harris said, we wanted to be laser focused moving forward. So first, we'll be embedding the charter system best practices throughout the school district. What we want to do is transition our mindset from being a charter system, just something that we're doing, to something that we are. So in that, we wanted to develop district-wide flexibility and waiver request process. We wanted to determine how to elevate effectiveness of district and school level innovations. We also wanted to determine strategies to integrate Board of Education into those waiver processes. So with that, this is when we'll be on the ground speaking with stakeholders and speaking with students and with the board to find out and determine the best practices moving forward and innovations that will be implemented in our next contract. Next, the focus that I will be giving all of my attention to is our LSGT development. We've already determined to create executive teams that consist of the co-chairs and secretaries, and we hope to give them and provide them with tools and resources related to the science of school improvement, such as problem deconstruction, root cause analysis, and innovation development. What we hope is that all of their innovations, all of their ideas and their initiatives moving forward will have the student success in mind. And the last and definitely not least is the charter system contract. We hope to provide opportunities to engage school staff, families, and students in the development of the new contract and to align the contract's initiatives to student achievement. You can go to the next one. So with that, the recommendation from the Office of the Superintendent is that the Board of Education pass a resolution that will allow the staff to seek renewal of the charter system contract. And with that, Dr. Thomas, we're happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Were you raising your hand? Okay, Mr. Davis. Thank you for that presentation.
You're welcome.
Are we going to be able to, based on the schedule, are we going to be able to, and it's not that, it'd be better to do it person to person, but we're going to be able to send folks who have been selected or will be selected to help us develop this new charter, specifically the community, the staff, and students and that type of thing, to the Charter System Foundation conference that will be virtual in November 16th.
So the individuals who are helping us develop the contract most likely no, but our current LSGT members and the individuals involved are in fact already registered and have received that information. The ones who are helping to develop the contract, we wouldn't be meeting with them until, after October, November. So they wouldn't be at the table yet.
Okay, what I would like to kind of share with other board members, just so they're aware, the Charter System Foundation has historically probably 6 or 7 years, have met in October with charter school systems from throughout the state to exchange ideas. And I have had the fortune to be able to have the scheduling to be able to participate in 3 of those. And it really gives you a sense of, there are things that we're doing that other school, charter school systems could benefit from. But there's also some that are really intriguing that we haven't tried yet. And I'm not suggesting them, but, things that other charter systems have done, or things like gender grouping in STEM classes. I know Dr. Means was always amazed that because he expressed it to me a couple of times, is he couldn't understand why an elementary school didn't propose becoming a Montessori school, which they could under our charter system and the waivers that come along with that. Year-round schooling is being done in some places. Of course, things like extended day. So it's just a good opportunity to, Mr. Harris has as many people who could participate, even though the virtual, I know, will not be nearly as big a punch, because I don't know if they're going to have the breakout sessions, because that's what they would do, is they would have these breakout sessions, and so you would be sitting around with other school districts who are also charter systems, and they would be exchanging ideas. And I would write notes. I just looked at my notes from 2018 and some of the stuff that those districts were doing. And like I say, we're doing things too that I think other charter school systems could certainly benefit from. But I think it's something that we need to be very aware of. And it is for anybody who would like to sign up. It's November 16th, and it's going to be virtual. I think most of it's in the morning, 8:30 to 11:30. I think
we can include the link in the board update next week as well.
That'd be great.
Any other questions? Or yes, Dr. Yeager.
So I think charter systems are awesome, and I'm glad we're renewing. But have you looked at what? So 17, 18, 19 was all pre-pandemic, and we had a hard time getting started. Are we troubleshooting that a little better for this time around? And have you got ideas about what to do different this next round?
Yeah, so Mr. Nobles would tell you that one of his tasks for the first month was to talk to as many people who were involved in that initial charter system process, including Mr. James Parliament, actually Miss Emily Boness, several of our community members, charter advisory committee members. So he's, I'm a firm believer in seek to understand before you seek to change. And so we have really hit the ground, or he's hit the ground, really starting to talk to individuals around what worked well, what didn't. I think part of this is how he also has mapped out these 3 buckets, right? So part of it is, we focused a lot on LSGTs, which are important, but in order to be a true charter system, it has to be who we are. So it has to be embedded in all of our processes, not just on the school level, but even at the central office, in our administrative offices. And so it can't be something that's just done at the school level. I think some of the other information we heard was talking about how do we keep it at the forefront of the minds of even the Board of Education through constant and consistent reports, even the marketing. How do we make sure that people see us as a charter system and not just as another school district? So we've looked at branding, marketing, messaging, And then even how do we keep a pipeline of LSGT? So, we've done assessments now with our LSGT, and the data is really fascinating to hear about why LSGT members stay, why some LSGT members leave, what supports they would like to see provided to actually feel like the voice that they're bringing to that table is valued, which is why he's also creating this executive committee. So yeah, his first probably month and a half of work has been all research. I say, no action. It's just time to go out and talk, but really go out and listen and hear. And people have been fairly honest,
Extremely honest.
very honest. So yeah, we wanted to do that before we start to change it, because otherwise it'd just be us coming up with something. So yeah, we're going to the people.
Thank you. I'm really encouraged by that.
I'm torn because I said we'd be done by 7:30, so I'm not going to ask my 3 questions. That okay. We're not going to make 7:30. Okay, all right. So we're not going to make 7:30. All right, but then my question is this, and I really appreciate the presentation, and I did get a chance to look at it earlier. As I understand the charter system, our choice was to be a charter system or a system of charter schools, right? Or to do with strategic waivers. And so the charter system is simply a way for us to kind of cut through some of the red tape, be more innovative, and go out and do the one thing that we're here for, which is to educate all of the children, right? And so do you get a sense that we are moving in that direction? Because the chart didn't give me that sense. So what has to change for the focus? And I granted, we did have to do a lot of work to create LSGTs. That was a huge undertaking, to have the community step out of that role of being dictated to by what we do in the school system to actually owning that process of defining what should happen in their schools. So that's hard work, and it's going to have to continue. But do we see that impact on student achievement? And what would help us go in that direction? And I don't want you to answer that now. I should have written that out earlier, but hearing you say it and reading it kind of jumped out in my mind. So I would really want us to see. I don't want to go back to a strategic waiver thing. That was difficult and challenging. But to me, the foundation for charter schools should be student achievement, maximizing student achievement through the use of those waivers. Just my thoughts.
Thank you. We'll definitely consider that.
Anybody else have any questions or concerns? Excited about the LSGTs. I really am. That's a big deal. Thank you. We are down to item 10 on the agenda. And this is our financial report. And we will be looking at the June financials. So that's our end of fiscal year 2021. 20 to 21.
All right, good evening, board members. Just to kind of set the stage, these are the financial statements for June 30th. So they're wrapping up last fiscal year. What transpired during the year is drastically different than what we anticipated coming into the year. And so before we actually go into these financial statements, I want to read just a snippet of what I had presented to you a year ago. Coming into this fiscal year, I said the FY21 cuts to QBE were more than $7.3 million. We're going to budget to make up for that shortfall by using $4 million in CARES funding and utilizing $2.6 million in fund balance. We are also going to transfer out $2.8 million from our property fund to our capital project fund for the new Prince Avenue property. So overall, entering in the FY21 fiscal year, we are planning on reducing or dipping into our fund balance by $5.4 million. What happened during the year completely changed that story. So a lot of things happened. For instance, the governor refunded over $3 million of the austerity, the money that they withheld from our QBE revenue. At the end of the day, at the end of the year, if you look at our fund balance down there at the bottom, we added $15 million to our fund balance. Can you scroll down just a little bit? Because I wanted to look at this here. So our beginning fund balance was higher. Our revenues that we anticipated were almost $7 million more than we had budgeted, and our expenses were about $13.5 million less than we had budgeted. Keep in mind that $13.5 million of expenditures that we didn't expend that we were authorized to was due to that FY22 budget amendment that we moved back, because we were going to use $6.5 million of CARES 2 money to supplement the FY22 budget, and we moved all that back to 21. So out of that 15 million, true savings is about $8.5 million if you back out that $6.5 million budget adjustment. Can you scroll back up to the top? So looking at our revenues, the only thing that's in red here on the entire financial report are the local property taxes. We received $1 million less than we had budgeted, but we definitely made up for it in other areas. Our intangible and transfer taxes, $950,000 more than we budgeted. TAVT tax, $1.1 million more than we budgeted. And these bottom two are really the pieces of revenue that we did not anticipate. So whenever we got the additional CARES 2 money and also the ARPA funds, whenever you expend those funds, you are allowed to charge an indirect cost rate for operating that grant. And so for CARES 2, that indirect cost rate is 10.89%. So the amount of revenue that we were allowed to claim off of those expenditures for the fiscal year was $950,000. And since we didn't anticipate having that grant, we didn't know it was coming, that's another $1 million of revenue that we didn't see, or that we didn't anticipate. Once again, the state QBE, the midterm adjustment, it resulted in $4 million more than what we had budgeted for. When we flip over and look at expenditures, in total, we expended only 91.9%, so roughly, or overall $13.5 million less than what was budgeted. And that's due to three large things. So salaries and benefits, there was a savings of $4 million there. $1.5 million was due to that salary realignment that we had. We saved on 1 month of state health that we had charged to FY21. So really the salary and benefit savings that's due to either unfilled positions or vacancies throughout the year was $2.5 million. The other areas of savings that we had were operationally. You know, we've got contracted services, utilities, electricity, stuff that we budget for. And when you have school that's entirely virtual, there's a lot of savings in that area. And then finally, there is the FY22 budget amendment, which shifted $6.5 million of expenditures out to CARES 2. So overall, when you add all those together, there's $13.5 million of expenditures that we had saved on. So overall, you look at the trends with the revenue and the expenditures and what happened, we're adding $15 million to our fund balance. Just opening up to any questions if you have. If not, we can move on to the supplemental reports. Yes, Mr. Davis.
The one surprise is the decrease in local property taxes, given the assessed values are up, and I'm wondering if we have from the tax assessor some type of explanation as to why.
So although it's red, it doesn't mean that the overall tax collections went down. They actually went up. We received more tax money than we did the prior year. We just over budgeted for it. We anticipated more coming in than we actually received. And I did reach out to Tony Meadows, and I think you know, they budget for 97.5% of collections. They hit that. So in my mind, that was just we aggressively budgeted property taxes.
Because always on the back of my mind is the fact that those who are over 65, they're, regardless of their net wealth or their income, their property taxes are frozen. And so, you know, that's always in the back of my mind as the population gets older and older. So.
Ms. Davis, we good to go? Okay. Supplemental reports. Overall for FY21, professional legal services, we had budgeted 199,000. We expended 270,000. If you back out that first $92,000 payment to Buckley and Beal, we were well within our budget. So that was an unanticipated expenditure. If you back that out, we are right in line with what we had budgeted. Down at the bottom of the page, we only had one line item of travel hit of $514. Out of our $18,000 budget, there was $17,500 worth of savings there. You can go on to the next page. So the next page, these are all of the invoices that were paid in June that range from $10,000 to $80,000. And these are just for your information to look through and peruse and ask any questions. You know, we had kind of made the promise to share these with you on a monthly basis. Can you go down to the last report, please? And here's our CARES expenditure as of, I really should update that because it's really CARES and ARPA now. In the previous month's report, you had seen the budget actually consist of the overall award amount. For instance, ARPA, they had awarded us $48 million. All you see here is roughly $2.5 million. And that's because at the end of the year, we want to reduce our budget on our books kind of to match what we actually received in these federal programs so that the financial statements that I prepare for the auditors aren't drastically overstated. It's just really, we want those reports to reflect more closely what we're actually anticipating on an annual basis as opposed to a budget that consists of a 3 time frame. So this is what we had spent for CARES 1, CARES 2, and ARPA as of the end of the fiscal year. Yes, ma'am.
So this must be the most common question I get, which is, how do we know how we're spending? How do the community know and the parents know and the teachers know how we're spending the extra federal dollars? Is there a way to be more detailed without a huge amount of work on your part? Because I know you're a busy guy. Either a school breakdown or that's what I'm hearing is a school by school. I don't know if that's absolutely necessary, but just a little bit more breakdown to, are we being equitable is one of the questions I'm hearing. Is this going to the kids that need it? Like, for example, the lines at-risk student population, and there's no money there. So like, why is there no money there?
Right.
So things like that we try to explain to people, and it's really hard without a little more data. And that was one of the things that came up at the community discussion, was a more transparent budget process, especially with these federal dollars.
So we can slice and dice this financial information any way that you want. And when I initially created this report, it was just to mirror how we report to GDOE. Yeah. And it's on these big categories, right? But I know next month, Dr. Thomas, I'm actually going to work in conjunction with Hope to put together a presentation. It'll include financial information, and we'll work together to find a better way, maybe some additional reports, but brainstorm on how to present this information in a more useful way.
That'd be awesome.
I'm not positive or confident that separating out by schools would be the best method at this point, because a lot of the stuff, like for instance PPE, we purchase that stuff centrally, and we book it to the operations department that purchases it and distributes it. So that stuff would kind of be hard to track. But overall salaries and benefits, we had those 2 flexible positions. We can share that budgeted by school, but really just have to brainstorm with Hope on how to best present this to the board.
Great.
And I've been working with Hope on that this week, and even last week when I saw some of the requests that came out about that information. And the state even released a dashboard, but it wasn't really it didn't give the kind of details that I think people want. So I know she's kind of already prepared to have that conversation with you, because we were trying to find a way that would actually answer the questions that we're assuming people have, about really specifics that I don't want to say that people care about, but it's just in a way, when you get into the bureaucracy of it, that you still don't understand what you're looking at. So how do you break that down so that people can really understand how is this money impacting our kids directly?
I would love
So-
to see that laid out against the achievement records at those schools. So if we're gonna look at money spent, then let's look at results obtained at the same time, because I think to put the dollars spent with no relationship to the work that we were supposed to do is meaningless.
Except there's going to be a delay, presumably, right? It's not going to be a
Well, we have
one-to-one.
one historical view. This is 3 months ago. So in terms of a delay, we can always be looking at,
Fair
you know,
enough.
this is what it costs to do that.
I think perhaps one way to approach this would be using that survey that was sent to parents asking. I think it was sent out to community members as well, teachers and staff, et cetera, asking how they wanted to see that huge chunk of money spent, like what areas did they identify, and perhaps taking that information and figuring out how to visualize it compared to what is being spent in those buckets of need might be a really good way. Because I think what parents are getting at and community members is not necessarily exactly line item by line item where the money's going, which is how you tend to look at it from a financial perspective. But really more like, what's the big picture here, right? So if there's $46 million, that, like, what does that look like in terms of like big programs and smart ideas and innovative things that the district wants to do to enhance learning? So it's more sort of that bigger picture, and I think that might be a good way to communicate where that money's going.
And hopefully we can successfully weave that into our presentation next month.
I have one question, and it is okay if you don't have the answer to it because I just thought about it. But when we look at our budget, have we put aside, I guess, or earmarked funds for our exceptional students who will need compensatory services since they weren't able to have those implemented during the pandemic? And that might be a Mr. Gaskin's question. And it's okay if you don't have the answer. I'm just wondering, has that been factored into our budget?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All righty. We are now at item, I'm sorry, any more questions about the financials? We are now at item 11, policies to be posted for 4 weeks for public comment. Is that going to be you, Dr. Yeager?
Yes, I think so. Shall I go ahead?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So we have 2 policies tonight. One is the vaccination policy, which was designed to follow on the heels of the incentive policy that was brought to us by Dr. Blankenship. And that incentive policy, as I recall, is going to wrap up December 1st. Is that correct? So we have an incentive plan, and I heard great numbers tonight, 1,700 out of 24. Okay, so as many school districts and many businesses around the country are doing, there's a proposal on the table to take the district to a place where we request that all of our employees get vaccinated. And so the policy has been written requesting that all of our employees get vaccinated, and I believe it would just go into effect as soon as we vote it up, which would be about 2 months from now. There are exemptions included. This policy was put together by, I believe, Mr. Davis said the guts of this came from the Teachers Association. Is that correct? So this has been sort of vetted by other teacher groups. And we allow for medical exemptions and religious exemptions that are in standard practice. And if the employees are granted an exception, there's no retaliation or any punitive action. And then finally, any employee without the documentation of a vaccine would then have to adhere to at least twice a week PCR testing, and then following other social distancing and other safety precautions. There's been a discussion about once a week, perhaps I would entertain a friendly amendment for that. There's also a sentence here that I think was supposed to be deleted in our discussions and did not get deleted. It's the first sentence in the final paragraph of enforcement and consequences. I think it's adequate to just have that second paragraph, that an employee without documentation must adhere to once or twice a week testing, etc. So this passed the policy committee. It received legal approval, or at least that it's legal. According to the state, we had to change a few things to be compliant. I think it's fairly well supported because it does have that ability to not get the vaccine if you absolutely refuse to get it, but we would ask that you then test once a week to keep everyone safe. And again, the goal here is not to be punitive at all, but to make sure that our kids can go face-to-face instruction in January. As a scientist, I watch these variants spin up when we don't have vaccinated populations. It's the reason we had the Delta spin up and knock us off our heels in the fall. And I would really love to avoid that for January.
So the revisions that you spoke of as you were reading this, has it already been updated to include those?
No, so if someone, it's that first sentence, unless an employee is exempt, it's that one. Yeah, that one I would recommend that be a friendly amendment would be to just remove that one because it's unnecessary and it refers to a discussion below that it isn't there. So I would suggest we remove that. But otherwise, I think it's pretty sound.
So we would make those changes prior to posting it for public comment is
Yes,
what I'm
ma'am.
hearing. Okay. And so we take the vote on that next week. So those revisions will be in there on the final copy next week.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The only other thing I would add is Mr. Harris was going to look into the testing. So there's questions about the testing, like would the employee have to pay for the testing or would the district provide the testing? I don't know that necessarily has to be worked out right now. But we have been in discussions. No, you can talk. Please talk. We have been in several different discussions, particularly with the very, very efficient UGA system to perhaps partner with them, but I'll let you take it from there.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Yeager. So we have met with the University of Georgia's Department of Public Health and the veterinary, I'm looking at Dr. Anderson, okay, veterinary science program. We had a really great discussion about their testing. It is a saliva test. There is a cost associated with it, right around $52 per person. And so what we'd have to determine is just the fiscal impact based off of the numbers. We now know we have, I guess, that difference of 700 staff who potentially are not vaccinated. And so what that cost would look like. I'm looking at my amazing boss here who may be doing math for me about how much that would be. Thank you. $500 per week if it was for once a week testing. And so we have been looking at the fiscal impact that would have on the district, as well as the operation. So working with Nurse Roark on just the process by which that testing would happen, picking up the sample, getting it to the university, some of those areas we were able to discuss and talk through. So I think the big question for us is the how we would enforce the policy if passed.
It's about $150,000 a month. So
I'm sorry,
From
that doesn't
37?
make sense. It's $3,500 a week. If you have no, you're right.
No,
35,000.
37.
35,000. Okay, and then times 4 weeks is
37,000 a
100.
week, right?
Okay, yeah, you're right. Okay, $150,000 a month.
Yes. So that's just a little concerning, but as you said, we don't have to work out the logistics today. So it would be just operationally how we get it done, but the bigger is just, us discussing as a board the financial impact.
Yeah.
I do want us to also think about the impact on the staff that are already worked extensively with having to do contact tracing within the school system. That is something that they were not prepared to do 2 years ago, and it's now an added responsibility that they have on top of their daily tasks. And doing
sorry.
this for potentially 700 people really does then impact whether you have volunteers, whether you have people coming in and assisting. That's still a huge burden on the nursing staff.
So I'm sorry, how does that impact the policy? You're saying the testing of 700 people would
Right.
impact the,
Right.
So-
The volume of the potential volume of people that would have to undergo weekly surveillance tests.
so the goal would be to get them to get vaccinated. You
I
think all
underst-
700 would agree to being tested every week instead of just getting the vaccine?
You don't know.
You're not on, I can't hear you.
If 700 people have refused $500 as a carrot to get vaccinated, then my only assumption would be that a large number of them would refuse to get vaccinated with this mandate. And we're talking about staff where we already have a near staff shortage. And we're also talking about potentially increasing the workload for an already exhausted nursing staff. That's all I'm saying.
And I guess
Point-
I would suggest, well, go ahead, Dr. Thomas.
Point of information. I'm just trying to, there's a switch going on here and I just don't understand it before I can't even follow the discussion. This says a PCR test. Are we talking not about a PCR test?
So the numbers that we're running around right now are based on a UGA saliva PCR test that is available to all UGA faculty and students currently. It's very simple. You walk up, you spit in a tube, and you walk away. It takes 5 minutes. They run 800 of these a day at UGA. This is the vet school is running them. And so that's the model of efficiency that I presented to the committee. Now, that doesn't have to be that. What they said was that very, very efficient system costs about $50 per test. And UGA is just paying that. We're not paying that. UGA is paying that. So that's kind of a gold standard. It doesn't have to be the only way we do the test.
So you're saying UGS would not, they would pay that for the school system too? Or just? for
Well,
the-
so I don't think that they have offered to
No, okay,
run them
well,
for
'cause
free.
You said we're not paying it. You mean speaking as an employee of the university?
I was speaking as
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. I was confused there.
Individuals do not pay for the tests at
Right.
UGA.
At
And
UGA.
so I don't think we would want to charge individuals $50 a week.
No.
But I mean, let me just say that I went online, my wife and I, we went online like we did before. We went to the health department on Monday. We signed up for a PCR test for Tuesday afternoon. We got our results today. Now, it didn't cost me anything. I mean, they're going to charge Medicare. And presumably, I think all insurances are covering the PCR test.
I believe you're correct about that.
And that does not put out the nursing staff at all. It's just a matter of us finding a way within, HIPAA, whatever, to have that, what the results of that test is validated. And if we're doing it twice a week, let's say on a Monday or and a Friday, it's up to the employee to schedule it. Now, the health department is doing it until 6:30 at night, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So I would put the burden on the employee who chose not to get vaccinated and not on the school system. And, it may not be the gold standard, but it wouldn't cost the school district anything.
So this
Except to actually verify, look at the card or look at it's actually it's a computer printout.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm missing something here. I'm not saying.
Well, I think that this is new to me. Again, this is the first time we've had a policy come to us with costs of implementing a policy change. And so I think that's fairly new to all of us.
Oh, I'm
And
sure
then
that's not true.
I'm sorry?
I'm sure that's not true, Linda.
Well,
But,
let me say it again. To me, in my recollection, this is the first time I have experienced this conversation. Doesn't mean it didn't happen someplace else, but it's the first time I've experienced it. And so, again, I can't speak to any more than what I've experienced. The question that I have is simply this. This is a policy that's going up for review, and are we now also, is this just incidental information that you're sharing with us, or tell me
Correct.
where we
So
are?
the policy does not outline the procedure, which would
Right.
be the district's responsibility to come up with the how, because that's not us. We get
Yes.
to do the what, which is the, yes, we want a vaccine mandate for our employees, period.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm thinking that at this amount of money, it's going to have to go through some bid process because of the rules that you have around finances. So I'm not sure if this conversation can take us there. But thank you.
Again, we get to do the what. The what is that as the district, we want our kids in school.
Right.
And as a district, we want to support a vaccine mandate because it means we will all be healthier. We will not have another variant coming back through us, hopefully.
Yeah.
And so this is the what.
No argument there.
So are we amending this
No.
policy?
No, we're not amending it.
Because it says, my copy says PCR.
It is
A PCR test is a PCR test. That's what all the tests are, except for the ones that you buy at Walmart, which
Okay,
are
so
very
what
sensitive.
I'm saying is when I drive through with the health department, I'm getting tested through the nostril, and
That works.
right, but it didn't cost me anything. It wouldn't cost anyone with the school district. It wouldn't cost the school district any money. So I'm not sure, and maybe I don't remember. I don't know why the discussion about the UGA system. I mean,
because we don't want to get sued. So
what do you mean we don't want to get sued?
we have to be extremely careful, and I can let Mike do it because I don't make as much money as Mike does, but we have to be very careful and shifting that responsibility to employees for something that we're going to mandate.
Okay, this discussion wasn't in the policy committee.
I was there on the telephone screaming, asking about these things. Yeah, I asked about time off. I asked about who was going to pay for the test. So we had the discussion, but we have to be very careful about telling employees we're going to mandate you do this, and then we're going to shift the cost to you, and then
It's not the cost. There is no cost.
Well, there's opportunity and time cost to think
So
about.
we're giving them 2
but-
days off of leave to do it. Oh, well, to get the vaccine. Sorry, we're not giving them time to get the test.
Right.
see.
So if they're sitting in their car for an hour and a half every week to get this test, hold on. What we're then saying to the staff is you're paying for this time.
correct.
And so then does it come back to the district to determine if this is going to be paid time off or non-paid?
No.
Does it?
Or for staff members who may
There-
not have transportation, our lower paid
Correct.
employees. But one of the things, and this isn't advocating for or against the vaccine, but as we think about how we operationalize it, is also, I hear what you're saying about you go to the health department, but we also need to talk to these testing sites to see if they can, from the way you're presenting it, Mr. Davis, can they handle the additional burden of 700 additional tests per week? Because that's a lot of additional tests to have to be guaranteed that people are able to access in the community.
I mean, when you
Because-
drive
So
into
does
a
it
fire
sound-
station and it takes 3 minutes,
I'm sorry, I can't.
and I mean, I never got out of my car. I never have.
But if I can't drive, what if I don't have a car?
Well, I mean,
And there are
I
periods where there are lines, particularly if we're asking them to get tested in these high transmission periods. There's a potential that they'll be standing in line. I just want us to be very intentional in knowing that once we pass this policy, that it's going to spiral into other questions that the school district will have to then determine how, from a regulatory perspective, they address it. I want us to really have this conversation.
So there were quite a few
earnestly.
chiefs in the policy committee. Dr. Thomas, do you want to address how the district feels about this policy? Are you unhappy? Are you
We are
supportive?
concerned. We're concerned about the cost because
the cost.
That's not all, but we are concerned about the potential financial burden of it. We're concerned, if we are having to pay for that, it's done correctly. We are concerned about what that means for who is going to do it, as Mr. Harris just referenced, who's doing the collecting, do we send them there? We can collect. I think that came up in one of our conversations. Who collects it, who takes it, who drops it off, that kind of thing. I mean, it's just a staff consideration. We have to consider who is doing that as a staff. We're also concerned about what does it mean for staffing. We already have about 40 vacancies, right? 34 vacancies, teaching certified vacancies right now. What does that mean for staffing for those individuals, those 700 individuals who, for whatever reason, are opposed to taking the vaccine? I agree with Dr. Anderson in that, and this is a conversation we had in our COVID meeting. If an individual is not motivated by $500, there is a definite reason, whatever it is, medical, philosophical, religious, whatever reason, that they're saying no. And we feel that, if you upped it to $1,500, if there's a person who's saying I'm not doing it, then they're not doing it. So what does that then mean for us in terms of staffing? So, I just have to be honest and transparent. Those are all things that we've had to think about. What are the ramifications going to be, and how do we prepare ourselves as a district team to be able to respond to those consequences that might come from this policy? I mean, and that's no different than any policy that comes up, is how do we operationalize that, and what does that look like for us as a system? So we have gone through the money. We've gone through, what does that mean in terms of staff getting there? What if if you talk about driving through and you work ASP every day and they're closed? I mean, what does that look like? And what are did I leave out anything?
I think it would be a different conversation if all school systems had a vaccination mandate. However, if you only have one system who is doing that, we're in an environment right now where employees have choice. They can go anywhere, any day, and get a different job, because that is the labor shortage that we're facing. So our bus drivers, our nutrition workers who might choose not to get the vaccine for whatever reason, they're going to be able to go to Oconee, Madison, Jackson, Barrow, any of the surrounding counties that don't have the mandate, and go there and not have to worry about the burden of going to get a test every week. So that's just the reality of the concern that we then have to try to find a solution for. If we are faced with mandating something for our employees that they are not going to have to deal with in another employment situation.
Can we reverse that and say how are teachers who are vaccinated, who are working beside other staff members who are not vaccinated, what are they thinking? And I asked for us to do some type of polling on this subject, and I know that that's just one of many things that we could do. But in terms of their safety level, and also in terms of the financial question, my thing is that how much is it costing us if someone comes down with COVID, who is a staff and unvaccinated, who are the vast majority of those who are actually getting COVID and suffering physical consequences? What is that costing the district? What's that costing our children? What about children who are exposed with the COVID and have to go home for 2 weeks, and their exposure comes from their teacher? Their opportunity cost at that end too. And I just don't. I feel like that we're just looking at it from one standpoint, for those who are drawing a line in the sand and saying, we just, for whatever reason, we don't want to do it.
I would also add to that, thank you, Greg, is the teachers and the bus drivers that will come from other counties because we have a vaccine mandate. Why wouldn't they come here? If they're vaccinated, they could come here and be around other vaccinated people. So if there's different ways of looking at it.
Well, I just want to put it out there, and I understand the reason that we would want to have unvaccinated staff and teachers tested. That makes sense. That's not lost on me. But that seems to be where the bulk of the money and the concern is coming from. If we wanted to have a policy that encouraged or even required vaccination, could we do that without the testing component that accompanies
What would be
it?
the consequences of not being tested then? So we're giving a medical exemption and we're giving a religious exemption. Would you then have no other exemption? They lose their jobs? Because the testing was designed, this is what Delta and lots of other companies that are in Georgia are doing to get around the you must be tested, you must be vaccinated or you're fired line.
So
You're
those
offering
exemptions
a
would-
weekly test instead of firing. And so the weekly test is supposed to be the opportunity to not get vaccinated, but still be healthy.
So I think we have to be very clear that we're in a sticky situation. I mean, I don't think too many people would disagree with the importance of vaccinations and wanting to have our students, our staff, our teachers be vaccinated, but we have to do it within the confines of the law and what makes sense in the confines of our budget. And so as I read the policy as is, we're still given a medical exemption and a religious exemption. The conversation seems to fall around the testing. If you fall into the exemption, having the testing done once a week or twice a week, that seems to be the sticking point that may cause this policy not to be passed by the board. So if there's a way to consider that as an option, that may give us the policy that we want to have without the cost attached to it. Otherwise, I don't see how policy will go forward when it will cost us $37,000 a week to implement it, and we're still not having important things for our children to be able to read, breathe clean air, to have bus seats and all those things. So that is my concern with it. I get it. I'm vaccinated, love it. I want my kids to go to school in an environment where they don't have to worry about COVID, but we have to look at what's causing a policy to be held up.
So you propose that anyone with an exemption could just wander around and be sick and nobody would know it?
If they have a medical exemption or a religious exemption anyway, they can wander around, be sick, and nobody know it. Because, I mean, you can't prevent that. You can't stop that. You can try to mitigate that, but you can't put them in a bubble, nor can you force someone to do that. It's not going to work. We're going to have a policy that's not going to matter because we're not going to have anybody in school. Our schools are going to close because we're not going to have people there. We can't fund it. We don't have that amount of money in our budget to require people to do that. And we can't force them to take that out of their own pocket in their own time.
Okay. This is
We
great
have to be
discussion.
serious.
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
I am so sorry. Go ahead.
No. Okay. So yeah, I'm grateful for this discussion. Very, very, very grateful for it. Have we heard from everybody who has a view on this that we need to consider? Go ahead, Mommy. Dr. Anderson. Go ahead.
I just had a question. I don't think I realized that. I thought that this read that there was a medical exemption and a religious exemption, and that people who had these exemptions would be getting weekly testing. I didn't realize that there was a separate category of people who are unvaccinated and don't have an exemption. That is what is, but that's not how this reads to me.
I think from the discussions that we've had on the emails is anyone who decides not to do it, regardless of exemption or not, would undergo.
Okay.
first
But I don't think
bi-weekly,
that's
now-weekly.
not clear in the
This policy
policy.
doesn't say that. It
Right.
doesn't require. It's not a mandatory PCR
It
testing
says
if you are
an
not
employee without documentation of receiving a vaccine must adhere to once a week, twice a week PCR testing.
You have to be in one of those exemption categories or not?
No. No, it does not require, that's
Okay.
the out. And
That's the
so
out.
that was what
Okay.
was specifically requested, that we make sure we have an out.
So people
For
that have the
non-vaccinators.
religious or the,
So if you have a medical exemption or a religious exemption, do you still have to be tested?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
so where's the out?
So what is the
That
point
is
of
the
having a medical exemption or going through the process of getting a medical exemption or a religious exemption? If it doesn't matter if you have an exemption or not.
Well, that's a good point.
Okay, so it sounds like we're not quite ready for this one yet. Do we? So tell me, I mean, you're the policy chair. You guys have spent time on this already. Are there some considerations that you need to look at before we decide what we're going to do with this policy? Does it go forward? I mean,
I think
for
what
this
we
week?
do is we normally do in the work session, we raise questions. And I've got some questions that I would like to ask staff. And for clarification, that can be brought back to us next week. And then we can vote on whether or not to move it out or whether to send it back to the policy
That is our
committee.
normal policy, right?
Right.
We'll leave it here. You're going
But
to
there are
compile
questions.
that list of questions. You're going to submit it to staff. We're going to hope the staff can turn that around before our vote next week. Is that where we are?
And I guess what I would do before to frame the questions is to delete tonight, suggest that we delete that first sentence under enforcement
So
and
can you-
change it to once a week PCR, so that we make those two changes. So that's the version we're talking about this week, not the older
So
version.
we'll send that updated version out
Updated
to
version out
everyone to consider
tonight.
so that you'll.
Does that work,
you'll
Mr.
be
Harris?
Commenting on the right
Okay.
version.
I had one more question.
Okay, I'm sorry, keep going.
This part where it says that must adhere to, now it'll be once a week PCR testing and to social distancing and other established safety precautions at all times. Is there an end date to that? Will it be until rates go to a certain level, or is it forever they have to socially distance? I just wonder if we need some sort of clarification to how long that will last.
I think
I know
that-
we don't know, like,
That would be one of my
date-wise.
questions to Nurse Warwick that I'm going to propose. Because I think it does. I think that's a good question. And I think whenever these masks can come off, whenever we can tell our kids, okay, kids, take them off, we're good to go. But that's just that. But I'm not a medical person.
Yeah, so that makes sense to have a sentence in there that says until
some
a
point
date
is-
approved by the superintendent or the superintendent's designee.
And then my final thing, and it's going to just turn everything around, but, and it's just a thought from something that Mumby has said previously too about surveillance testing. I feel like the policy would be more palatable to say that we want to do surveillance testing for a larger group of people, including students. And if you are vaccinated, then you could opt out of surveillance testing instead of saying get vaccinated, and if you're not vaccinated you have to be tested. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, and I think what we keep losing here in this conversation. So a lot of other agencies and organizations that have moved to this mandate, the large majority of the people that walk in the halls of those buildings are all going to be vaccinated due to this mandate. That's not the case with the school system, and that's why a lot of the health policy studies are saying that it might not be as effective to only have a vaccine mandate for your staff, because that's not the majority of the people in the building. And so when you have under 12, all unvaccinated, the majority of our teenagers not vaccinated, mandating the additional 700 people may not have that big of an impact on transmission rates, and already a Delta variant that has a transmission rate for already vaccinated individuals. So it's kind of worth considering, and I tried to say this in my email, it's kind of worth considering if this is the type of mandate that we want to put forward, that it also has
a surveillance testing component to it, because then you are seriously, from a public health perspective, saying we value our efforts to reduce transmission rates rather than just we want to do this because we want to do it.
So,
can I just reply to that?
yeah,
What
and-
I
and-
heard
yeah,
during the
please.
past
2
year
minutes, and
is
then we're
that the
gonna stop.
reasons the schools shut down was not because the kids were getting sick. It was because the staff was sick and that we could not maintain the staff. Is that not correct? It was the schools had to close because we couldn't maintain, we didn't have teachers. The teachers were going home sick.
Custodians.
Well, sure, but it was because the teachers had to go home. And if they're vaccinated, they don't have to. Is that correct?
So I'm going to stop here, okay? Because I think, again, we're having a policy committee meeting.
Well, this is what you get when you get rid of policy committee.
Well, I said, I'm exactly with you on that, because I totally think that if this were brought to us by the staff, then they would have worked through all of this, right? And we wouldn't have had this whole conversation, partly anyway. And so I'm going to ask that we table this again, and let me ask. I'm going to ask something even more, and I don't know how much power I have sitting in this seat tonight, but if I have the power to mandate a called policy meeting with the people that have the expertise to address these concerns, then I would like to mandate a called policy meeting so that you can actually make this the agenda item, and let's flush through this, and then bring a policy back to us where at least as a house, we're not divided and we know what we're trying to go forward with. So that would be my recommendation or my request, because I think that I'm hearing valid arguments on both sides. And so how I was going to vote for this hasn't changed based on any of what you've said, but and I don't know if it has for anybody else, but I'm asking if we could have the conversation to explore the right language to do and the right thing to do for the right reasons, because I am again, there's a lot of logic that's coming out here that we haven't really spent time talking about.
I think that would be appropriate for next week. I think that what we normally do is that when we bring something to the work session, we talk about it. If there are additional questions, we are asked to turn those questions in as quickly as possible and give staff the opportunity to respond to them, so that when we go to next week, we look at the additional information that we've gathered, and then this board will make a decision whether or not to push it out for public comment or send it back to the policy committee, or if you wanted to propose an alternative grouping, then
All of that's happened tonight and we've ignored that. And so let me say this. What's different about this policy is it didn't come from the recommendation of staff. I don't know if they all weighed in on this. That's not what I'm hearing tonight. So this came from is this a board policy that we brought to the policy committee? And did we have again, because my experience on the years that I was on the policy committee is, regardless of what the board wanted, it went to staff. Staff did the research. They knew the impact. And so they were either prepared to support it, and they brought the language to support it to the board for consideration. If we've done that, then I apologize.
We had a policy committee meeting and there were chiefs at the policy committee meeting and it passed. So
Again, has the research been done by not the chiefs, but the people that work with them to bring all of this to us? Because it sounds like we're hearing things for the first time tonight.
The cabinet did hear, there were chiefs there. In full transparency, it was made clear, and no one's upset about it, but it was made clear to us. This was actually before that meeting. There was conversation, there was some dialogue about where do policies generate from. And we did receive an email of clarity from Dr. Yeager saying that policy can come from the cabinet, they can come from the board. And so it was evident to us that that was a policy that some members of the board or that the policy committee wanted to see move forward. And we were respectful of that, allowed that to work as a policy generated by the board. And then we've been waiting to see what happens so that we can be prepared to respond. So it was not generated by us, but it was very clear that it didn't have to be. And so as team players and being collaborative, we've been sitting back to see. Of course, we're not just saying, well, we'll see what happens. We've been talking through 3 and 4 times a week. What will this look like? How will we support this? What are the implications for us, so that we can be prepared based on how this is handled in terms of a vote.
And so again, even regardless of where it comes from, it comes in through the assessment by the administration, because you're the only people that can do that. It's not us, right? And so that's where I'm getting confused here. But okay,
Yeah, it's
at this
governed.
point,
No.
this needs to go back to policy based on the recommendations that have come from this board in terms of some changes that need to be made. Is
So
that
the
what I'm hearing?
language that governs that is policy BDC, if anyone wants to reference it.
And I think what Greg said is correct, is that next week, because it's on the agenda, we either vote that we want to put it forward for public comment or send it back to the policy committee, right?
Thank you so much for reminding me of that. And I thought I heard it, but I didn't hear it. So I apologize for not hearing it when you said it. No big deal for me, but it is a big deal because again, I think that, yeah, we're going to have answers before we can go forward with that vote. And so rather than have us see it on the agenda next week with no clarification, then I'm hoping that somebody will get those questions asked.
I haven't had a work session yet where I haven't asked questions afterwards before the meeting. So, and I'm sure most
and I'm
of
a
us.
witness to that.
Yeah.
I was here when you came on board. So, and that there's nothing wrong with that, other than it doesn't change the fact if you don't have the information, you don't have the information. So and we can't create it by discussing it. So I'm back to, I guess it'll be on the agenda for next week. And I'm saying it's not ready for the agenda, but that's fine. If it gets ready between now and then, we'll go forward. Thank you so much for that one. Dr. Yeager, what's up next?
It's on the agenda for next week, but I will work with the policy committee to do something this week. All right, so 11.2 is an old item that has resurfaced after 6 months of what we said was trial. If you recall, about sometime 6 months ago-ish, we talked about lowering the, what's the wording? I'm sorry, I'm a little rattled. Reducing the amount of money permitted without a board vote for Dr. Thomas to spend, and it has been sitting at $80,000 for quite a while. We talked last year at some point 6 months ago about reducing that to a smaller number. I believe legally we can reduce it to as low as 10,000 or as high as 100,000. We had a conversation with Dr. Thomas. She seemed comfortable 6 months ago with 50,000. She still seems comfortable with 50,000. We've been getting financial reports every month saying what those things are and, what we're spending money on between 10,000 and 80,000. And there's an occasional big thing that looks a little odd to me. So I'm comfortable dropping it to 50. There also are lots of 10s and 13s and 15s and 25s that seem like something we don't want to try to approve. So policy committee brought this back on schedule and said, all right, Dr. Thomas is still on board with 50. Do we want to change the 80 down to 50 as previously discussed now that we have all the data? Or do you want to say no? You can vote no and say, no, I want to leave it at 80. So the choice is what we talked about 6 months ago after looking now at the data.
Any discussion on this policy? Thank you. Item 12.
I'm sorry.
We're at item 12. There was no further discussion. So this is going to be voted on.
12.1, 12.2, 12.3, and 12.4 are all policies that we worked out and have been up for public review. You've heard these explanations before. As far as I've heard, there is no public comment on any of these policies. So any questions about them, I'm happy to answer, but one has to do with insurance management. Another has to do with leasing and renting properties. Risk management is a review only. The security one, I believe we talked about a month ago, was we've added a sentence asking that when use of force reviews are done, that there should be a non-law enforcement member on the committee that does the review. That's a sentence we added. But we talked about these a month ago.
So these are ready for adoption.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Any questions about these? Okay, we're moving to item 13. Personnel recommendations.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Davis, it would be my recommendation that the personnel reports be moved forward for approval next week.
Any questions about the personnel recommendations? Moving forward to discussion items. This is the action regarding committees, and absent our president and vice president, I'm going to ask that we table this item or push it forward to next week's agenda, because I think that that's a full board discussion. Any objections to that?
I would object to putting it next week. We
Or
shouldn't
moving
have
it
that
forward
discussion
another
next
month.
week.
Then move it forward to the next work session. Would that be better?
So just table it, period, for now.
Table it, period. Okay. We will, any objections to tabling this period? I would ask that maybe we start collecting some information about what people have concerns about for that, so that we don't come to this space again and not have any foundation for that conversation.
And I will say that based on the feedback from the retreat, we did put it on the policy committee agenda to revisit that committee, or the board committee policy BDC, I think it is. I forget. It's on the policy committee agenda for a week from now.
So it's on the agenda a week from now. And so that's one that, again, since we don't all go to that policy committee, because we can't all go to that policy committee, this one might be a special meeting so that we can all participate in that discussion. So that's one of the challenges I think we have in our board structure, when we can't all be together on something, or we'll repeat the same thing again. So maybe that's one that we can make it a full board committee meeting, and make sure that we're all able to come.
So would that be a called meeting?
Yeah, it would have to become a call meeting. That's just my recommendation.
I mean, it definitely seems like we need to have this conversation prior to having it in the policy committee meeting, right? Because the policy committee meeting is going to change the language and talk about the language surrounding committees that we have not yet decided how they're going to go.
Yeah, and that's, to me, that's where the tail's wagging the dog, when it comes there before we actually had a type of agreement.
All right, Mr. Harris, you can remove it from the agenda for the policy committee.
And then the next item is the consent agenda discussion, and we're at item 15, item 15.1. Item 15.2, approve the September 9 board minutes. Item 15.3, approve field trips. I want to chaperone on one of those, so if anybody's listening. Item 15.4, approve the revision of the academic calendar. And then approve item 15.5, approve the local emergency paid sick leave extension. Item 15.6, I'm sorry, what's the discussion on this one? Is there information that we can provide tonight? Or you just want to vote separately on it? Okay, if there's additional information that you need, please notify. Awesome, thank you. Item 15.6, approve the purchase of collaboration licensing. Consent. Item 15.7, approve the train the trainer course for restorative practices. I'd like to approve that now. Okay. Approve the item 15.8, approve the resolution to seek renewal of the charter system contract. And item 15.9, approve the advisory committee participants that has been pulled by Dr. Thomas, and it will be discussed next week, as I understand it. We are down to item 16. 16.1. Thank you. So by Attorney Hall and seconded by Mrs. Gallagher. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Oh, I broke my promise. Tried my best.